Good. So now that we've been able to address a little bit about the fonts and trying to get them to look a little bit more interesting, at this point what I want to be showing you is how we can actually insert elements inside of our code so that we've added extra div information. Alright, so what do I mean by this? Well, essentially we want to take our existing layout and we want to split it into multiple areas. So in other words, my main section looks like it's one column of information, and we want to sort of stagger that so that we have potentially two columns inside of there as well. Let's address a couple of things first and foremost. We know that the area inside of the main section, right? Let's go back to our CSS for a second and we'll see what's going on with this. We know that the main section, aside from that 1 pixel border that we have in there, is 759 plus the 1 pixel border, so that gives us an area of 800 that we can work with inside of the main area. So what if we wanted to split that in two? So in other words, have the main area still have the same information that we did before, but the only difference being is that we're going to split that main area into two columns as well, so that we have a different sort of outlook and a different sort of layout inside of this. What we're going to be doing is addressing some custom classes, and these custom classes are going to help us because eventually I want to add some extra divs down in the footer area as well. So let's go into our code, and first and foremost we're going to go into the main section, and let's scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you can see, look, there's some main text and it says ends main here, and that's wonderful. The only difference though is before the main area ends, so you'll notice I'm just creating a separation here, leave this div that says ends main separate from the rest of the elements, and what we're going to do is to add a small paragraph and some other information in here as well. So we'll start by introducing a div. Don't worry about the classes just yet because we're going to add one soon enough. So within this sort of nested div that I'm creating, we're also going to have, well, actually let's create something like a h3 in here as well, and I'm going to say nested left div for my h3. We'll put in a little paragraph of information, so I'm just going to borrow some of the text that I've got in here. It doesn't have to be a ton of text, just a couple of lines, nothing too crazy. And I'm going to paste that in there, and we're going to close this paragraph as well as closing this div. So notice, it's not really necessary, but I'm going to put in a HTML comment in here that says ends nested left div. Okay, and right after that I'm going to ask you to copy the entire information that we just put in, and let's also now introduce another div that says nested right div, and we'll see how that's going to work. Alright, so with this information in place, we're going to now take a look at our work. So if I save this and we just preview that in our browser again and we refresh this, you'll see, well, nothing's really changed. It kind of looks the same. Nested left div, nested right div. Well, what's different? Nothing. Everything is exactly the same, and it just goes to show that, yeah, you could just add more information. I didn't necessarily need to put those in divs if they were just going to look the same as the other ones. I could have just made them h3s and paragraphs, and that would have been fine. But on the other hand, what we will be doing instead now is to make these divs appear right next to each other, left and right. So as I mentioned, we got about 800 space to work with here. But do remember, on the left-hand side, there's that one pixel that's being used in there. So I think what I'll do is I'll make the one on the left actually be a little bit smaller than the one on the right. So let's go into our CSS. And what we're going to be doing here is, I believe I'll still address some of these elements inside the main area, just simply because we are going to be dealing with main information first, and then we'll create a separate one for the divs that are going to be down at the bottom inside of the footer. So first and foremost, I'm going to say, look, inside main, anything that has a class called, well, let's say left, and notice I'm not spelling it left, I'm just saying LFT float. Okay, so we'll do that, and we'll open and close this, and as we separate it, what we're going to be doing at this particular moment is just that. We're going to specify a width for this. So I'm going to say, look, the width for this is going to be, well, we want to split it in half, right? So instead of 400, 400, because we got that 1 pixel, remember, I'm going to say 399 on the left with our pixel information there. And finally, we're also going to float this thing on the left-hand side as well. So I'll just float that left. And we'll do this. Now I'm going to copy this information, and we'll just paste it underneath. And this time I'm going to say our GHT, right float. Actually, let's spell this correctly. It doesn't really matter. So left float, right float. So it's a class called left float and a class called right float. The only thing about the difference for the right one is, yes, it's going to be 400. And of course, we're going to be floating this on the right-hand side. So let's save this. Let's also go back to our code. And remember, we have these divs, but there's nothing going on with them. So I'm just going to insert the information for class. And you can see I really only have 2 classes, left float and right float. So I'm just going to use left float for the first one, and then we'll have a class of right float on this one. So if we save this now, then we go back into our work, and remember, this is what it looked like originally. And if we come in here, you can see that we've got a little bit of information issue happening in here. It seems like it's off by maybe 1 pixel between my left div and my right div. So there could be some more information that we needed to address, and I might just be missing something. So even if we were to keep this one, let's say 399, and if I save that and see if that extra 1 pixel made a difference, doesn't seem to be. So perhaps what I'll do is think about really making this a little bit more. I'll try like 390. And let's just keep this at 400 for the moment. And if I were to save this and we come back in here, you can see that it's working, but it's not really quite there yet. We could give this a background color just to see what the elements are. It's, generally speaking, a better idea for you to be doing this all on paper and getting it matched out first. I'm kind of eyeballing things here. And as you can see, it's showing me that, you know, perhaps I'm not taking into account the fact that there are some elements inside here that are larger than others because we've got, 20 extra pixels of information. So it looks like I've got a genuine issue here with a good amount of information. So perhaps both of these could be set to 390. And if they are, and we save this, you see we're getting there, but it's not quite there just yet. So perhaps what I'll do is say, listen, 380, 380. And if we save this and we come back here, you can see now that it looks a little bit better, but if I were to give a different background color to float right, we can see we're probably going to be just a little bit off. And I'm just going to take another one here, which is just a little bit lighter. So if I save that, and we come in here, you can see that, oh, look, it's just 1 pixel, right? So let's get that 1 pixel out of this area. Remember, I had to consider that we had some extra 20 pixels of space on either side of this information, so it wasn't really 400. We're really dealing with the extra 20s as well. But we do have that 1 pixel because of the border on the left. So instead of 380 on the left, I think I'm going to say 379, and we'll save this, and let's take a look. Voila. Now you've got something that fits just perfectly right next to each other because we've taken a little bit more time calculating exactly the size that we need, and we can, keep that in mind and make sure that it's all ready to go. If you like the fact that these things are colored, you can even keep them colored. There's really nothing wrong with that. But if you wanted to sort of keep things consistent and remove those colors, that's really not a problem. I just had them in place so that I could, take a look and see where my positioning was. But if we save this now and we come back in here, you can see that, check it out, even without those elements that we had before, we still see a good amount of gutter space in between our elements in here, which is just wonderful, exactly what I wanted. And we can also split up this nested area into not just one column of text as we see here, but actually two columns of text as we see right there. So that's a really wonderful way for us to sort of break up the monotony of this basic section. And it also allows us to, keep things a little bit more interesting from a visual perspective. But the last thing I want to show you before we move on is that even though we've separated these two areas into separate columns, nested left and right divs, if I wanted to, I could have another H3 and paragraph directly underneath it, and it's really easy, as you can see in just a second. I'm just going to go into, remember we have ends main right over here, so if you don't have the separation there already, just put in a separation. And you'll notice before our floating left and right divs were in place, we had a H3, another subheadline, and an open close paragraph. I'm going to copy that information, and let's come in here and let's just paste in that information yet again. There it is. And then we close our main div. So I'm going to save that, and now if we preview in our browser, so remember we just had the left and right, but if I refresh that, aha, now we've got one that spans the entire column. So really nice job just setting up some basic information, how to work with nested divs and how to separate those. Why don't we come back in the next video and I'm going to show you how we can also set up a bunch of divs down in our footer so that we can create a number of multiple columns in here. More than the 2 and 3 that we've seen so far. Let's just create maybe 4 columns down at the bottom. All right, so come back and we'll do that in the next video.